We will return for another chapter in the story of the forest ranger and the bear. Now, this story starts off when the ranger who was formerly in the cabin is moved to another location, to another part of the country, and a brand new ranger is appointed to the cabin in the wilderness where all the wounded bears are. Now, the supervisor of the new ranger gets him aside in the office in one of the supervisor's headquarters, and the supervisor tells the new ranger, now, you're going to go out and take your post out in the cabin, right out in the middle of the mountains in the wilderness there, and you know what your duties are. You've been well trained in it. Your duties are to watch for fires and to check rivers that they're not flowing too high and might cause a flood, weather reports, send them back to us, everything that has to do with being a good ranger. But especially out in that cabin, isolated place where you're going, one of your main assignments is to take care of the wounded bears. There's a large bear population out there for hundreds of miles around the cabin, and there are a lot of illegal hunters out there. And they shoot the bears, and sometimes they just wound them, or they trap them and their paws are caught. So whenever you see a wounded bear, you're to help him. And the young ranger felt something was pleasing about that last assignment, part of his assignment, that he was supposed to help the wounded bears. He felt needed. He felt very important. As a matter of fact, he could hardly wait to see the first wounded bear out there so he could be his helper. So he moved on out to the cabin and settled down after a few days and kept his eyes open all the time for wounded bears surrounding the cabin. There was the cabin and a clearing space of a couple hundred yards and then the vast woods beyond it. So he looked out, and sure enough, one morning, he was looking out there, and there was a wounded bear. And it was obvious what was going on. The bear was limping, and the ranger could see through his binoculars that he was apparently got his paw caught in a trap, and it mangled it somewhat. And the bear was pathetic looking and sad, and because he couldn't get food very well as he used to because of the wound. So the ranger went out and put himself in a position where the bear could see him, hoping that maybe the bear would understand that this man in the uniform wasn't his enemy at all, but was his friend. And the bear eventually did notice the ranger and started limping toward him a little bit. Then the bear would look up apprehensive and go back a little bit. Then he'd come back a little more. And all the time, the ranger was quite eager for the bear to come up, because the ranger felt so important that he was going to help him. He felt like someone. I'm relieving this bear's pain. I must be okay. So he did all he could to encourage the bear to come up, and finally it did. Got real close, and scared all the time, of course, but finally he got right up to the cabin. And the ranger was able to communicate to the bear by putting food out to him, letting the bear know that he was in a safe place and food and care would be provided. And the bear was very grateful for it. He went to the food, and there was a little rest place out to the side where the bear could get out of the hot sun and cold days, cold nights, where he could rest and have food and recover. So after a few days, the ranger felt that he had the confidence of the bear enough to look at the wound. He didn't want to do that at the start because you know how touchy it is. You know how touchy you are when you're wounded, right? So he was being intelligent about it. One day he went out to the bear resting place there and took some of his bandages and soothing ointments and very cautiously approached the bear, and what happened is what he thought would happen. The bear snapped at him, and he prudently withdrew. He tried again, tried to get close to the bear, trying to communicate as best he could that he was going to help the bear get over that wounded paw that he had. But the bear just snapped at him, wouldn't let him come close at all. So the ranger at least temporarily gave up on that and continued to put food and water and shelter out for the bear. He noticed after a couple of weeks that the bear started to change his attitude. And he didn't understand at first, but he knew what was happening. And what was happening, that the bear was beginning to snarl at least several times a day, whereas before he never snarled at all when he first came toward the cabin. And the bear started engaging in what the ranger could only call vandalism. Where the water was set out, he would take a drink and they'd spill over the water. And when some food was put out, he'd take the part of the food, then he'd scatter the rest. He would waste it, destroy it. The bear even came up to the cabin door and tried to push it in, get inside. When he couldn't do that, he knocked some chairs off the porch. He was turning into quite a savage animal. Ranger said, well, that's because he's been wounded so badly. I'll try once more to heal his paw for him. So he tried, and the bear again snapped at him. From that point on, the bear became unbearable. The ranger understood something that he didn't want to admit, but he knew what he had to do. And he made it very clear to the bear that he was no longer welcome there. And he, in his own communicating way, told the bear to get out, to leave altogether. And it was a strange thing, though. Are you following? It was a strange thing, though. The ranger felt guilty about telling the bear to get out and stay out. He felt guilty about it. But I'll tell you what he felt that was far worse than that. I'll tell you that in a minute. The bear finally left, and when he left, he snarled all the way out as he backed out of the clearing and back, and he snarled at the ranger. Vicious snarls, clawed at him, and finally disappeared into the woods. The ranger was shocked. Remember, he was a young ranger. He hadn't had experience with bears in the woods as yet. And he was shocked. But more than shocked, as he was sitting there one evening trying to figure this strange situation out, he finally saw something that he didn't want to see. But he said, I've got to face this once and for all. If I don't face it now, I never will. So I'm going to face it. And what he faced was something that was extremely humiliating to him. Terrible blow to his ego. And here's what it was. That bear had tricked him. He knew that all along that bear didn't want healing at all. He wanted the handouts. And he, the ranger, was stupid, weak, gullible, and fell for it. That, listen to me, that is what hurt. But he faced it. He admitted that for all this time he had been stupid, plain old stupid. He didn't understand. And he understood why he didn't understand. He was playing a role. He was playing the role of the good, kindly ranger. Bears would come and I heal them. I am the healer. I am someone who is sort of a minor deity in myself, where I can do things for bears and help them out. Well, he went through that experience and learned from it. But we're far from the end of the story, ladies and gentlemen. And you're all going to smile and nod in about 30 seconds, I think. He said to himself, thank heaven I have learned my lesson. I'll never, never, never be fooled again. Well, it was 20 seconds. He was fooled again by the next bear. No, look, the pattern was repeated. All the time he thought he'd got the lesson, he understood. He'll never be taken again. Hey, girls, you know what I'm going to say, don't you? Fellas, you know what I'm going to say, don't you? It happens all the time, doesn't it? You think you've learned, and the reason you don't really learn is because you haven't thoroughly exposed and got rid of the role-playing by which you are somebody who can do something of yourself, an independent healer of the whole world, or at least of your next-door neighbor. When are you going to learn that the bears out in that world don't want healing at all? They want the handouts. People can come to a truth class like this. The bears come in here. Of course they do. And they want to see what they can get. And one thing they can get, if they can just get a feeling of hatred, that is what they wanted. They don't want to be healed. They want to get the feeling of a thrill. So eventually the ranger did learn something. And oh, how it changed him. What he learned was that whenever he saw a bear out at the edge of the woods wanting to come into the clearing and eventually up to the cabin, whenever he saw a bear, he made it not 99% clear, 100% absolutely. There's no way the bear could misunderstand it, no way the bear could miss it. Bear, you want healing or nothing. You come up to this cabin, and I'm going to watch you. I'm going to tell you, here is the soothing ointment, and here's the bandages. You can be healed if you want. If you don't want that, you're not going to get anything. He understood how foolish he was to put bread and food out for the bear, water, because that's what the bear wanted, the free food. He understood, from now on, I've got one thing to give you, healing or nothing else. If you don't want that, take off. And they practically, all the bears took off, snarling at him, because they saw that they couldn't get the handout from the ranger, who had now, after many, many years of experiencing and learning, understood what it means. You either want it or you don't, and I am not going to meet you anywhere halfway between those. Truth or nothing. Now we can examine a little more. Keep the bears of this world in mind and keep your own self in mind as follows. The wounded bears are egotists, and almost every one of them has become so hardened in their egotism that there's no way they can ever want healing, get their paws healed, their minds healed. All they can want for the rest of their life is vibrations of their egotism. And that happens in two ways. Here's our familiar opposites again. The sick, psychopathic bears of this world want, on one hand, a positive vibration of their egotism. They love the vibration of their wounds. And the positive side should be clear to you, which is simply when they get something that seems to affirm them as being a separate entity, as being someone who has a life of their own. So when a human being gets the flattery, gets the excitement over the forthcoming trip, gets the thrill of living in mental movies, that is what is called a positive thrill vibration to their egotism. And they like that. It vibrated, therefore it must be alive. An automobile vibrates, but it's not alive. Or on the negative side, listen to this, on the negative side, they feel a vibration of their egotism if they're insulted. They feel a vibration of their sickness if they hear the truth and they don't want it. Therefore, they feel antagonism, surliness, bitterness, or whatever. And they get the negative reward of talking to themselves. That's insanity. And that's what they do. People who leave this class and don't come back are compelled, how about you, additionally, are compelled to talk to themselves about the experience in order to push back the truth that could heal them. That is them coming here, and instead of wanting healing, wanting the free handout. wanting something that can't do a thing for them, but continue the vibration, therefore continue with the sickness. Ponder all this, apply it to your own life. Let's take a leisurely but very alert look to see what happened in the world today. Today, millions of human beings took airplane trips, train trips, automobile trips. They were going places. They're going shopping, and they're going to offices. But the main point is, millions of human beings traveled billions of miles today to go somewhere where they weren't before. Also today, millions upon millions of human beings went to schools of various kinds. High schools, colleges, special schools. They went to school and they read books and they made notes and they studied their lessons. Other millions of human beings went to business offices and to farms, factories, and they worked and they earned money. Other millions of human beings went to churches and religious institutions of different kinds. And they sang hymns and they read books and they talked about God. And they practiced devotionals and they prayed. In other words, this has been a pretty busy day out there in the world, hasn't it? Think of all the activities. Billions of human beings doing tens of thousands of things. Spending all that money, spending all that energy, thinking hard, straining their minds, trying to absorb facts and information. Just think about it. I want you to get the whole picture of what went on in this world just in the last 24 hours. Now you listen to me. This enormous expenditure of mental energy, physical energy, emotional energy, financial energy, everything that happened today in this world, just think of it, the enormity of it. And now think of this, that not one person, in spite of all the activities, all the laws passed, all the money spent, not one person is one bit happier than he was before the period of time started. Look at it. Aren't you astounded by seeing it? Maybe not, because you don't see the impact of it. Look, what are they running around for? They say, I want to be happy. If I take the trip, I'll go somewhere and I'll feel better when I come to the end of the trip. I'll put in a day down to the office and maybe I'll get a little more money than I had before. And maybe the haunting fear that takes me over, maybe it won't be quite as fierce. I want you to know that these billions of human beings who engage in these billions of activities, I want you to know that they did indeed have a purpose and aim. They were going in a certain direction. And it failed completely. Now, here it is. The end of just the last 24-hour period. The businessman leaves his office and he goes home. And he's made a few dollars. And the farmer comes out of the field and he goes to his farmhouse home. And he's planted a few more acres of corn. The student goes home to the school dormitory. He's got all his books with him. He goes home. Nothing has happened in connection with the real purpose of their being here on earth. Millions of human beings failed in their purpose of life today and yesterday and the day before. And you don't have to be much of a prophet to predict that they're going to fail tomorrow. So look at the picture we have so far. Everyone, no matter how much money they made, how much they educated themselves, how many degrees they achieved, how many laws may pass, think of it. Not one individual is 1 inch higher in spiritual understanding, which is the only thing that counts. Now, if you think that's pretty bad, listen to this. Listen to the second horror story piled on to the first. Not a single one of those active, frantic, furious human beings, not one of them knows that they failed. They failed and they don't know it. They come home and they sit down at the dinner table and they have a certain sense of satisfaction that they accomplished something today. But you listen to me. That farm wife, she went to bed just as heavy-hearted as she did for the last 40 years. She spent the day in the kitchen taking care of the cooking and the kids. And she went to bed the same woman she was that she got up. And the man, go back to the city now for a minute, that man spent all that time making decisions, writing down business notes, looking at his profit and loss ledger. Nothing real happened to him, to her, because nothing spiritual happened. See the whole picture so far? Now let's go a little further. In this last 24 hours, we don't have statistics, but I can sure give you a good guess. I will guess to you that around the world, tens of thousands of laws were passed that were supposed to make human life better here on earth, in that country or in that city. Thousands of laws passed and repealed and changed and interpreted and judged and put down in the books, those enormous books of laws they have. You've seen them in a lawyer's office. All these laws were passed and nothing has happened. Nothing has happened that is real, and nobody sees it. Do you see it? Nobody knows that the day was wasted. Nobody knows. Nobody wants to know. That farmer, that farmer's wife are going to go to bed tonight, right about a couple hours from now, depending on the part of the country you live in. They're going to go to bed, and that businessman and his wife are going to go to bed, and they don't know that today they did not live their own life. They lived society's life. They went out and did what they were told to do. They were told that if you do certain things, if you go to church today and you go to work today, that this is called leading a happy, active, fulfilled life. And not one of them will ever see the difference between what they were told and what happened to them at the end of the day, which was where they were still miserable. No one looks, no one sees, no one comes to intelligent spiritual conclusions. Nobody knows the length and the unendingness of the horror story. But you had better know it. You had better check up sometime how you feel at the end of the day. And even if you end your day with anger and disappointment and feeling empty, even if you end your day with that, you are still under the same spell as everyone else who might have felt a little bit fulfilled. Because you have decided what your reward will be. Your reward will be to feel hatred toward what you are caught in. How's that for a choice? To decide that that woman, that 40-year-old farm woman, she's going to go to bed feeling bitter. She doesn't dare say anything. She and he are both afraid to say anything. Have you ever noticed that in yourself? Have you ever been aware that you have caught a glimpse of something hideous in your life with that society that you mingle with? Haven't you ever caught a glimpse of that, and all of a sudden you heard something inside of you say, stop, don't go any further with that line of thinking that you're pursuing? Let me tell you why that stop comes up inside of you. You're afraid to expose the show for fear that you might not be able to have all your present collections of thoughts and emotions which now make your life what it is because you have settled. You see, I'll tell you, it's a very, very rare woman on the farm or in the town, a very rare man anywhere, who when he gets this feeling of futility says to himself, there it is, I wonder what it's all about. Why this repetition of me saying someday, some night, I'm going to come home and I'm going to feel light and free and happy? How come I've promised myself something and it never is delivered? Wait a minute. Where did I pick up that promise? Oh, he's starting to think a little bit intelligently now. He's thinking, let's see, when I was a 10-year-old boy, my father started talking to me about how I should make my living, how advantageous it would be if I went to college or didn't go to college, if I did this or that. And I could tell what my father was driving at. He was telling me that if I did what he did, I was being as happy as he was, and I can never go for that because I've seen too much. You had better pray fervently for the day when something happens inside of you where you begin to see something that is absolutely shocking, and you say to yourself, I am not going to hide that anymore. I'm going to, instead of hiding it, I'm going to follow it all the way to the end to see where it takes me, because I know where my father's advice and my mother's advice took me. Took me with physical illness, for one thing. Took me to physical illness. It took me to being a crabby, irritable, irresponsible, wild man who goes down to the bar or drinks at home and wonders whether there's no end to this, and then heaven help that man or woman who finally settles for what you've got, which most human beings do. So we've seen what happens all day long. All that energy, and what happens is simply a horrible, dreadful repetition that it inevitably drains and drags down the individual. And the more desperate he gets, the more he becomes an expert in putting on the smiling masks and keeping the masquerade going. So that when you see him on the street or you run into him in the cafe, you're so gullible and stupid yourself, you think that he has it made. You don't know what's going through that man and through that woman because you don't know what's going through you, and you know it. You don't know what's going through you. You're just wandering around hoping for, listen to this, for settling for life. Shame on you, how foolish. You wander around your day hoping that something will come along to give you temporary relief from the agony of it. Right? You know it's right. So we've looked at the world. Now we're going to look at ourselves. And I'll illustrate how we're going to look at ourselves. And you'll understand as I go along. Here's an inventor who invents a robot. And he gets off in his laboratory and he works real hard on the electronics of it and making it walk right and talk right. But he invents a robot as close as he can to make it a human being. And it's long, hard work. But he finally gets it to the point where it can walk around, talk to people, even go shopping. And here he sits at home in his control room, and he has all these TV cameras, pointed all around, where he can sit in his control room and send the robot out into the world. So he watches the controls and watches the robot, and it goes on out and it goes shopping, and it drives a car, and it goes down to various business places, just various business that the man himself would do. But the robot does it for him. But there's something wrong with the robot. It isn't perfect yet, so it does all sorts of wrong things. It bumps into people. It says stupid, impulsive, unkind things. It gets in accidents, picks itself up and goes a long ways, gets into another accident. In other words, the robot behaves pretty much as the people do out there. Gets into trouble all the time. Now, the inventor's conscientious, and he studies the mistakes that the robot makes, so he gets it back in the laboratory for 2 or 3 days at a time. And he looks at it, and he takes a screwdriver and pliers and changes some of the circuits, trying to improve it. And he works on it a little bit, and it goes out in the world, but it still makes a lot of mistakes. Still bumps into people, bumps into a wall, doesn't even see the wall. Doesn't see the wall and bumps into it, and it crashes down to the ground. And it cries out a little bit because it's been geared to suffer. Now, let's leave the robot wandering around town a little bit and look at the robot maker. He's trying. He's a sincere man. So when the robot goes out and bumps into someone, sooner or later the inventor goes out and he tells the person, "I'm sorry, my robot bumped into you. It's not perfect yet, but I'm trying. I'm sorry." He took responsibility. Isn't that nice? He took responsibility for when that robot did something wrong. Go out and apologize to the person. Says, I'll try not to let it happen again, but I can't guarantee it because after all, it's still only a machine. So he keeps working on it and finally gets to the point where the robot is reasonably accurate, does a minimum of damage. Guess who's the robot? You know, don't you? Now we're talking about you as a person who has seen through the world we talked about during the first part of the talk, and you have understood thoroughly that all those books and all that money and all those trips haven't made you happier. They haven't raised your level of understanding of yourself or of the world. You've understood that, and so you become a beginner in spiritual studies. And so you begin to work on the robot, which is your old nature. You're trying to improve it. You don't really improve it, but for the sake of illustration, we'll say so. You begin to work on it, and you understand that the way to keep that robot from bumping into people and getting hurt itself is to have a few of the old-fashioned virtues, the old-fashioned responsibilities that you absolutely have sensed was right all this time, but you've never employed them because you haven't really wanted to change anything up until this time. But you look out at your old nature, the robot, and you see the dreadful things it does. And you know pretty personally how it feels when it gets hurt. And you begin to question why, whether it's necessary or not. So you take it into the spiritual laboratory. Now we're talking about us now. You take it into the spiritual laboratory, which this class is, and which the books and tapes are. You take it into the laboratory and say, now just a minute. I better take a look at that connection of that circuit over there. There seems to be something wrong with that. I can do something about that, or rather, I can let something that knows more about the robot, you see, this is real spiritual talk now. I can let something that knows more about the robot than I do make the change for me. I will guarantee you that when you take your old bumping, bungling nature into the spiritual laboratory and you want to change it, it will. Because you're no longer satisfied with your life as it is. You begin to see there's no advantage at all in reading all those books about music and about geography and about history. You begin to see that you were a compulsive human being who thought that acquiring all this information would make you happy. It doesn't. Acquiring all that religion would make you happy. It doesn't. You're beginning to give up. And when you begin to give up, along with that, you understand the necessity for giving in. And we can talk a little bit now about you as you are connected with truth, with reality, with God. We can begin to see how there is a human being, a mind, a spirit that occupies a physical body. There is that, and there is God. Now, unfortunately, when we're young and foolish, which is an awful long time, right? We begin to think that we can make contact with God. We begin to think that all you have to do is, for heaven's sake, all you have to do is claim God as your own. Why do you do that? I'll tell you why you do that, because the robot inside of you is tricking you into thinking that thinking about God, singing hymns, thinking that that has something to do with self-change. You have never given serious, earnest, honest thought to what it means to change yourself. You don't want to. That's the last thing you want. A robot is not going to make any effort, any conscious effort to change being a robot because he's incapable of having consciousness. All they can do is do today what he did yesterday. Now, there is something within a human being that you can say, for the purpose of explanation, is halfway between the individual and God. This exists inside the individual, who is presently a robot, but something besides the robot begins to develop inside the man, a very little small dot, oh, it's very small, that begins indeed to say, all my life, I've got the money, and I've got the women, and I've got the activities, and I've got the trips, but I don't have happiness. I have excitements that I used to call happiness, and I have a lot of thrills. So I wonder whether there is something other than my scheme for becoming free and happy. Because my schemes have been working furiously for 30, 40, 50 years. And I always come back home at night the same person who is in the curious state of being, listen to this, of being both excited and depressed at the same time. Halfway between you and God. You have invited that to begin to do some work for you. You have employed it to do for you what you've never been able to do for yourself, which is to say, here I go, I don't know where, but I employ this new bit of wisdom to take over and control my life and change it. For the purpose of illustration, of course, the inventor was the intelligent part and the robot was the mechanical part. And so we can say that we're the robot finally understanding that that is what he is. You understand that you have no life of your own, which you don't, by the way, none of you here. But you want to know what lies beyond futility and hideousness. And so you put out the invitation and say, now, I don't know what power that is, that little dot, but I know it's energetic, because it's already shown me things. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it's going to take me. I don't know how it's going to change me. I don't know whether it's going to make me feel good or bad. I don't know anything at all. Thank God for the day when you say, I don't know what that dot of energy is or what it will do, because you are daring to trust it instead of you. You have to be a thoroughly humiliated human being to get to that point. You have to be a human being who can begin to recognize your own lies and self-deceptions when they begin to churn inside you. You see, you tolerated all those lies for all these years because you didn't want to see them as lies. But now that energy, that little bit of energy comes in, and you say, all right, I don't want to see I'm a liar. Show it to me in spite of myself, and it will. And you'll hate it. The robot will hate it, and you will love it. Oh, you're falling in love now. Something new, huh? You fell in love with that little bit of energy when it first came into your life. You knew it was not like you. 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 You knew It was not like the robot. It didn't have gears and circuits and batteries and flashing lights. It didn't have that at all. It was pure. It had no deceit in it. It had no mechanicalness in it. And you could look with your own spiritual sight. You could look at it and you could say, robot with gears and flashing lights, pure energy over here. Now you know the difference between this world and the spiritual world. And now you can make your choice, can't you? Now that you see the difference, believe me. Choice! Once you see the difference between this mad world and that pure world way high, once you see the difference, that is the choice. You don't stop and go back and forth. Should I take this or that? There's no battle at all, is there? If you have your choice between living in the slums and the beautiful countryside, you don't call that a choice. You're gone. Out of the slums, out into the pretty country with the pretty trees and the streams. Same with this. Now look, see how nice truth is. It puts this bit of energy, which is all we can take at the start. It puts this bit of energy in front of us, and we look at it, and first we're afraid, then we're astonished, bewildered by it, and then we are attracted to it. You see, because there was a small part in us that was humiliated completely. It could recognize the bit of truth, the bit of energy that was put out in front of us. The two come together, you see. Now listen to me, and then we'll stop. Whether you know it or not, God knows what he is doing. God knows what he is doing with you. Will you let him do it? Will you let him put out the attraction and don't close your eyes to it? Just be attracted by what you see. And the more, listen to this, how's this for an encouraging fact? The more you take of the truth that put out, the more God will give you. You want to go slow? You want to go fast? You can go real fast if you want. If you look out and reach out and take what's put in front of you. You'll never run out of supply. It'll get more and more and more and more. And it is larger than the universe. There's no end to it. Think of the billions of light years. That's how vast it is. And it's all waiting for the person who will take it. There was once a man who didn't know what to do with himself. And curiously, he was a man who had a lot of money. He had a lot of activities. He had lots of things to do in his life, but he didn't know what to do with himself. And we might explore that right there. You see, when you don't know who you are, but adopt fictitious identities based on memory, based on experiences, when you have fictitious identities, you are desperate to keep them alive. And so you chase around mentally or physically, socially, financially. You chase around trying to keep yourself, what you call yourself, active so that you can keep up the illusion that yourself is real. This is what leads to nervous exhaustion, to insanity, to wishing you could go out into a cave somewhere and just hide out from the rest of the world and not have to face it anymore. This false effort to keep your false self alive is what keeps your life so internally heavy and dreadful. Look at the clues already that you have toward finding something that is not you. There again is your contradiction. Only knowing the fictitious people inside of you, only knowing those, that's what you treasure. And you'll do anything, I said anything, no matter how evil, to keep them going. I've told you many times, and I'll tell all of you listening to this cassette for the first time, that when you're living from fictitious selves, many of them inside of you, the whole world, if necessary, becomes your prey and your victim, because you justify everything you do by saying, it is right for me to perpetuate myself. It is right for me to survive. The mistake you're making, which you don't see, is that you're trying to keep alive something that has no life in itself. Therefore, you, with your false moves, keep your own misery going. I tell you, when you see this, the seeing of that will be the action by which you release yourself. And releasing yourself is the same thing as releasing all your grief. You know very well, and I know, that you feel yourself to be overwhelmed. You get up in the morning and you don't know how you feel yourself a victim going out into the world. Of everything you meet, you become a victim of it. The higher prices, the grouchy neighbor who you think doesn't like the way you park your car, something like that. And the whole world. Only an extremely sick, egotistical, unpleasant person ever thinks of himself as a victim. What words do you associate with the word being victimized? Very simple. Me, I, mine, all connected with this fictitious identity we talked about. Would you like to cut out the strain out of your life? No, you wouldn't. Because you could have done it a long time ago had you really wanted to. You see, the purpose of this class, one purpose, is to show you shockingly in front of your own eyes that you don't want out at all. The thing you fight most fiercely is a fact, some information that comes along that says, sir or madam, if you do this, you will achieve a certain inward spiritual result. If you will understand that you have nothing of your own, nothing at all, if you will understand that and follow that through to the very end, you will see that you don't have to have anything that is your own, because you will have put out of existence the owner who is false. Have you ever owned anything? What? Money, a new motorcycle, a boat, a wife, a husband. Have you ever owned something and then got real afraid that someone's going to take it away from you? You're going to lose it in some way or other? How about ownership of your own present existence? You are terrified that someone is going to take that away from you. You don't know what the total amount of delusion in that thought alone. Since there is no owner, listen to the beauty of this if you can see through it. Since there's no owner, there's nothing to own. You really want your physical body, you're worried about your health. You want your physical body to relax? It will. You want your whole spirit to relax. Why didn't I see it years ago? I tormented myself all these 10, 20, 30 years by not seeing there is no owner. Therefore, I don't have to possess anything. I don't have to cling to anything. I don't have to look out and wonder if my wife is going to go off with that other man. Someone's going to take away my reputation. I see, because I now see that in my real nature I am complete. There is no division between an owner and the owned, the possessed. I can go out and earn my living, make money, take care of my bills and things like that. But if they cut my pay or if they fire me, if my wife runs away with another man, so what? What has that to do with me? There is no me, therefore, to be connected with. Look what the world is missing. Look what you are missing by not living that. I didn't say just seeing it. You see it first, and that leads to living in one way. They're the same thing. But you're not living the fact that you, look, let me tell you something you don't know. By the clock up there, it's about 6 minutes after 9. By the clock time and by spiritual time, you are free right now. There's one thing that prevents you from realizing it. Therefore, one thing that prevents you from having the nice, quiet, relaxed, sitting back, looking at the world without being involved in it. And what that is your own mental clock, which you depend upon, which you want very much to keep, because the mental clock is what provides the self-references you need to keep your fictitious identities in place. You go out into the world on this day, which is Saturday, and you go out and you say, there is a situation. There's a stranger coming up to ask me a question. There's a financial matter I have to take care of, and you're confused by it. You don't know what to do. You never know what to do you? You don't know anything at all. All you do is fall into the easiest decision finally, and that so-called resolves it. You say to yourself, well, the only thing I can think of to do in this situation is to do what I did before. And so you do what you did before, and you get the same pain that you had before, the same confusion, the same feeling that you are not in command of anything, which is a fact. Because you have chosen the lower way, presently at least, instead of the higher way. Now, if you could understand, put together everything that we've talked about so far, you could understand that it's necessary for you to detect how you use the mental clock of time, of memory, of self-reference to guide you into handling your daily life. You've always done this, and you always get the same result. If you want a different result, then you can't let the old you be in place to look at the clock and say, all right, this is how I handled it last time. This is the way I'll handle it this time. Let me tell you what you don't see and why you keep this psychological clock going. I'll tell you, listen to this. You won't understand it. You don't see that mental pain is a bad thing. Let's try that again in a different way. You don't see that for you to feel frustration inside of you is something that goes against your life. Try it again. You don't see that this nervous agitation and those nervous eyes with which you look out at the world, you don't see that that is something that is an enemy to you, to who you really are, of course. Having taken yourself as the fictitious self, and having vowed that that is the only thing that's real, and that's the only thing that's important, you now therefore feed that at every opportunity. Therefore, you are saying incredibly that hatred and resentment and self-pity, all those are good for me. Of course they are good for your old nature. Of course they are good if you want to stay as you are. Because they will keep you exactly what you are. They will keep you a lunatic who knows how to behave in a way in the exterior world that people don't know you're one. That's not the point. You people listening to this talk on this cassette, You know what you're like inwardly, don't you? I'll leave it to you. Come on. I won't describe you. You describe yourself right now. You can do it right while you're listening to this. How would you describe your inner condition? If you're real honest, you know there's something terribly wrong, don't you? Now, if there's something terribly wrong, that can be corrected by putting into action, by obeying the principles of truth that you have heard. Don't be afraid to give yourself up. Another way to put it, go ahead and be terrified of not knowing who you are, but do it anyway. And one day, one beautiful morning, the light will dawn. Thought will be out of the way. Self-descriptions will be out of the way. You will no longer think about yourself. You will no longer have ideas toward life. You will no longer wonder about the past or the future. You will know what eternity is because you're living in it right now. Here's a man, we said at the start, who doesn't know what to do with himself. So he goes downtown to the big town. And as you know, there are a lot of movie theaters, dozens of them in big cities, right? And so he goes into a moving picture show. And he sits there, and it's a double feature, as they usually are. And he sits through two movies. And he feels strangely good. And let me emphasize the word strangely. He feels strangely good while sitting through the two movies. And the movie ends, and he gets up, and he comes out into the real world again. And he gets a little anxious. So he looks around, looks down the street, and there's just what he wanted, another movie house. So he goes down to that one. He pays his money. You have to pay your money to go to a movie theater, don't you? To see fictitious things happening on the screen, you have to pay for it, don't you? So he goes to the second movie, again a double feature. And he feels, quote mark, safe while he's seated there in the dark room, looking up, seeing only what's going on the screen there. He feels okay. The movie ends and he has to come out, and there he is in the bright sunlight, and he blinks a little bit. And he doesn't feel so good because a lot of unconscious thoughts go through him. Unconscious meaning he doesn't see them. In which he thinks about those bills that came in the mail today, and he doesn't know how he's going to pay them. But that is pressing down on him as he walks down the street. And then he thinks about the fact that he may get fired from his work because they're moving the factory to another state, and that's pressing him down. And he sees all those romantic scenes on the movie screen, and he doesn't have a girlfriend, and he sees a lot of pretty women pass him as he walks down the street, and he hasn't the slightest idea of how to talk to them or what to say if he was to talk to them. So he plays it safe by not doing anything but walking in a straight line straight to the third movie theater, and he goes into that and he watches it and he comes out. Now let's see what's happening to the man. When he goes into the movie theater, he can lose himself, can't he? He can divert himself from the realities of the outer world out there by concentrating his mind, looking up and staring at the screen, not looking left to right, not even noticing the exit signs that are down the front and to the left and the right, which the fire laws require. He can look straight at the screen, and he can be there. He can be there in Morocco or Japan or Mars. He can be there having marvelous adventures. At last he has a life that he says is endurable. There are no threats. No one can scare him for now. No one can scare me as long as I look straight ahead as long as I don't look even to the left and right. If I see the little sign that says exit, that will remind me that there's another world outside there. And I'm not going to look over there, just a slight glance. You know how they are. The exits at the back of the theater on either side of the screen, little exit sign. He's not even going to look at those because that would disturb the romance and the adventure that's going on up on the screen. So he feels safe. Look what's happening to him. And we're talking about us, of course. We're talking about us, the moviegoers, the constant moviegoers. No effort is required. He doesn't have to face anything that's frightening. He can hide out as long as his money holds out, as long as he can find enough movie theaters. And by the way, the whole world is thick with movie theaters of one kind or another. There's the bar, and there's the football games, and there's the parties, etc. And so we feel that we can hide out and don't have to think our own thoughts that come to us when we temporarily get between movie theaters. The point is this, ladies and gentlemen. If you want out, you're going to have to unlearn your movie watching habits. You're going to have to come out of the theater. What is it? The theater was you driving your car along the highway and thinking about that exciting event that's going to come up in a day or a month or in another 10 minutes, the dinner, whatever. And you're thinking, as long as I'm thinking this, I'm safe. I highly urge you, I strongly urge you to keep yourself at all times in unsafe conditions, where you don't have this fixed stare up in front of you, nothing to distract you, nothing to amuse you, but you come out of the theater and you just walk around, which you're doing anyway, walk around the streets, and instead of watching the movie screen, watch your own mind. Oh, what a different kind of a story you're going to see there. You may see an occasional monster movie on the screen. When you watch your own mind, you're going to see nothing but horror movies, are you not? If you don't know that, then I'll tell you that. You're going to see your little pretenses, your phony smiles, your hopes. And this is very, very much more prevalent than you think. Your hopes that something is going to turn out right after all. You're not sure how, but the hope is enough for you. You can't go into too much detail because you don't know how your fantasy movie is going to turn out. But you say, if I hope, that in itself is sufficient. That's enough for me to hang on to. Therefore, I won't have to face the fact that the bills are piling up, that I may get fired, and I don't have a friend. I'm all alone in this world. I'm now going to tell you, all of you, how to get out, so that you're not going to waste your life watching the movies all the time. You go out in that street and you just let every possible thought come to you that scares you. You think you have 10 scares, you have 10,000. You think there's just a very few things inside of you. You can only see the tips of them, the more prominent ones. There's all kinds of other thoughts marauding around down the basement of your mind. I tell you, they cannot harm you in any way if you let them come up. They are harming you because you won't let them come up, so that you can look at them and say, now let's see. I have a $200 bill for my automobile, and the rent is due, and my bank account and my money in my pocket is just barely able to cover it. And I don't know what's going to happen next week. My God, do you know what you're doing? You're reliving a movie drama that you saw on the screen and you took it out into the world. Will you please stop dramatizing yourself over the fact that you only have $200 in the bank and the bills are $400. I'll tell you, the answers to life are 50,000 miles above the way you are now thinking, and you had better get shocked at what you hear here. You had better see that your pains are simply more glorifications of what you saw on that screen. You've been living in movie dramas all your life, and when you come out the theater, you bring it into your life. You think the problem is that you don't have money or don't have a woman. You think that is your problem. That is not the problem. The problem is that you are lost and refuse to find yourself. By the way, now don't you twist this. Don't you dare twist this. When you know who you are, you won't have any financial problems. Well, what do you think caused your personal financial problems? Your nutty mind. You can't think clearly about the simplest of things, including economics. But that's a side issue. You don't have to be the man or the woman who worries about anything. I said anything. What's the personal disgrace or tragedy connected with your childhood, with earlier years of your marriage, of your family? What's that disgraceful thing that now haunts you and directs your thinking, and you're glad that nobody knows it? What is it? You know. I don't care what it is. You know what it is. Don't you understand that there's nothing but the movie that happened in the physical world perhaps at one time, but you're running it through your mind? The drama is running through your mind, and this is what you prefer to being sane. You don't have to be insane. And being insane is running the movies over and over again. Back to a major point. It is your duty as spiritual students to unlearn the bad thinking and emotional habits that you have acquired by going out into the world and seeing how other people behaved and how they handled other things, and you took it upon yourself as being the only way that you can unreal your own life. You must make an effort to understand that that way of living can only be something, listen, can only be called something that is bad for you. Now, the reason I put that so simply is because I know how you think toward your worries over money or anything else. I know something that you don't know about the way you think and feel. I know that you treasure worry. I know that you like to feel surrounded by enemies and frightened by them. I know that there's something in you that does not want to give up. You walking down the street and seeing all those handsome men and pretty women, and you saying, I don't have one of those. I wish there was some way I could get one. I know that you have taken the screen, the movie screen outside, and put it outside and living there and don't even know what's happening. Do you know one reason why people, including you people, are hostile toward truth? Listen to this. People live out in the world of movies, and they come to a meeting like this, and they sit through a talk or two, and they get angry, and they get hostile, and they get afraid. And here's what happens inside their mind. They don't know what's happening. It's all unconscious. They go outside, going on home, and they say to themselves, how horrible, how unrealistic, what fantasy, what nonsense. And then here's what they say. That isn't the way John Wayne would have handled it. That isn't the way Gone with the Wind unreeled on the screen. Those people are living in fantasy, in delusion. I'm going to live in the real world. How about you? You know who your favorite hero is? Anyone you can find inside yourself. And sometimes you have to search pretty hard, don't you? To find someone who lives up to your high standards of heroism and strength. And of course, you assure yourself that you know what strength is. You say, of course I know what wisdom is. I know what it is to be intelligent. You have the slightest notion of what it is to be intelligent. You have your substitute strength and your substitute intelligence. Now, the question is this. For all of you listening to this talk and all of you here, here's the very simple question. There is something desperately wrong inside of me, yes or no? Now, don't you dare answer anything but yes or no. Try it again. I say to the whole world right now, I say to every individual in the world, sir over there in China, madam over there in Iceland, there is something terribly wrong inside of you. There's something mad going on inside of you. Sir or madam, yes or no? Will you, listening to me, refuse to let yourself escape that marvelous trap of yes or no? You're not going to get anywhere evading it. You know the answer, of course. You know the answer is yes. I have all kind of deceits inside of me. I play tricky little games. I look at people and I figure out how I can get something from them. What can I get from them that will make my fantasy movie seem like real life? I can make them smile at me by giving them a gift. I can do this or that in order to get something from them that will keep me assured. If you can say, yes, there's something wrong with me, something going on all my life I've never understood, now you have a chance. You see, this is the problem with the world out there, and it's not going to change at all. The world will never permit you to put that question before them because they know it's leading them right into the trap where they're going to have to face themselves once and for all, or evade it if they wish. And they will evade it because they know, come on. They know what's going on inside. They know how tricky they are. We have decided that no matter how painful it is to say, yes, I'm a little trickster, a charlatan, I lie about everything, we have determined to face that in ourselves and let anything happen as a result of our honesty, let it happen whatever wants to happen. Because we've understood that there's no true peace of mind, there's no real freedom outside of going through this process. Unlearning the movie life means that you have to come out of that movie theater and understand that it was a movie theater with all the heroes and heroines behaving in a fantasy world, and it doesn't happen that way out in the exterior world. If you were to face every difficulty that you have inside of you, you would never ever have, listen to this, if your inner world was one of truth and reality, that outer world out there could never present problems to you of any kind, and that includes piling the bills on top of you. Any problem whatever that might seem to come to you is stopped by your understanding. There is, listen, in reality, there is no entity inside of you at all that can suffer, that can be envious, that can be scared, that can go wrong in any way at all. How can falsehood harm truth? Live from truth and you'll never be harmed again. When you were growing up, you had certain experiences with people in which certain insights came to you. And if you'll put your mind to it, you can think back when you were a child or a teenager, and you can think of a certain incident that happened at a family gathering or at a picnic, or you went to your father's work one time and met some people or whatever. It would be helpful and interesting for you to recount some experience you had that taught you a certain lesson about human nature, about yourself, about your parents, about life in general, where you looked at that situation and say, I see how nervous people really are. All those people in the room were all shouting at once. Nobody could just sit back calm. My family was gathered around the table, and I guess everybody was just so eager to, wow, human beings are sure nervous. Understand? Things like that. Maybe you can pull something like that out of your memory and give it to us. And that will strengthen it in you.